Good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you're seeing this. Sorry I'm a little late posting. I got a late start on it. So today we start talking about civil rights, and it's going to take us a while to get through the civil rights in Texas. So we have to begin in the 40s for Texas as far as civil rights. This book, as well as many other books I've read, always point to the fact that African American soldiers were coming back from fighting in Europe, fighting in Asia, in the Pacific, and they came back to segregation. And I always like to point out that there were movements long before World War II, long before World War One, for desegregation to happen. So we have a couple of landmark cases, and we have a very interesting person in Miss Lulabelle Madison White. So Miss White came to Houston. She organized the NAACP, and she actually had the largest NAACP in all of the South. Not just in Texas, not just in Houston, in all of the South. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's an organization that worked to end segregation, that worked to end disparity, that worked to end poverty, and the NAACP is still around today. One of the landmark cases was Dr. Lonnie Smith in 1944. He was a dentist. He's the guy right there, right next to where we're talking with the white shirt on, no tie. And what he did is he worked to desegregate the primaries. Okay, so this is how it worked in Texas. African Americans were not allowed to vote in Democratic primaries. Most African Americans were Democrats, okay? But they couldn't vote in a primary. Therefore, when the candidate was picked, now they could vote in the general election, it was too late. African Americans couldn't get candidates that would support them and work for them because they didn't get a chance to vote in primary. So the Supreme Court found this to be an illegal process, and so Dr. Smith was able to help us desegregate and allow everyone to vote in the primaries. Mr. Heman Sweat sued to be allowed into UT's law school, and again, the Supreme Court found that it was unjust the way that Texas kept African Americans out of law school. And so Mr. Sweat is the gentleman in the top left-hand corner. Desegregation of schools was a whole nother thing. So 1956, Supreme Court ruled in in Brown versus Board of Education that separate schools were not equal schools. And so these five ladies and gentlemen are a prime example of what happened in Texas. So these five lived in Madisonville, Texas. They were not allowed, because they're African American, to attend the high school in Madisonville, Texas. So they were bused to Fort Worth. But that's not it, because Fort Worth is 17 miles away. That's not the only thing. Being bused to Fort Worth, the driver wouldn't even drive them to the school, and so they had to walk 20 blocks to get to the school. 20 blocks. So they sued, and they said that, hey, they wanted to participate in extracurricular activities and sports. They couldn't do that because of the very late time, because of the time it would take to get back to Madisonville. The court agreed with them. But guess what? Texas still didn't desegregate. And it's not until 1965 that Texas starts to desegregate its schools. One person that I remember very well is Barbara Jordan. So she's the first African American back in 1965 to be sent to the Texas Senate. Then in 1970, she's the first African American in the entire South, first African American woman in the entire South to be sent to the House of Representatives. And so she also spoke at the Democratic Convention. And I'll never forget how spellbinding it was to hear her talk. And I just gave you a little quote from that speech where she said, "America's strength is rooted in its diversity." Barbara Jordan really carved a way for African Americans to serve in public office. So guys, the CNN 10 question is, what state is Northlands in? Okay. And then the other question is, I'm from Houston. Barbara Jordan was from Houston. She inspired me, especially when she spoke. I took every opportunity as a kid. So it's not like today where you guys can pull stuff up on the internet. I took every opportunity to hear her speak. And she inspired me. So I want to know, who inspires you when they speak? Okay? And you got to tell me why. So I'll be looking for those answers. Well, have a great day, and thanks for your patience.